So yesterday we started our agenda with regards to administrative thought, right? Today, before I get into the administrative thought, I want to come to a far more utilitarian idea. I have been getting requests from some of you regarding a few things. Time management. Some of you have informed me that the last time that you wrote mails, you could not complete the paper. Also, the way I am seeing your responses, I thought that this is the most opportune time because from next week onwards, I would urge all of you to start writing the tests that you have enrolled so that by mid of August, we have completed at least half of the test series. Okay. The another issue is answer writing. A lot of you are writing good answer. Content knowledge is good. But the way you write, they appear more like notes, not my answers. Right? Vivek, you sent me some answers and I replied almost on the similar lines. Did you get a chance to see that there is a notes factor which is coming in and it is not the answer that might be required? Okay. So today we'll make a promise. Promise to each one of yourself and a promise to me that we will be able to write any answer. And this will apply across GS as well. Right? Any standard 10, 15, 20 marker in under 7 minutes. And that's a promise that I will make to all of you. That I will tell you a technique. Yes, with the start of that technique, you might not be able to achieve this time. But the moment you are 100 to 150 questions under your belt, so as to say, you'll be able to achieve this time. Okay? So what I'll be needing from you is some sort of a hard work. We are going to actually see some certain techniques. Some of you might know, some of you internally are following this technique or a part of it, right? But may not be conscious of it. So we will be looking at how we will achieve this and what to write in an answer. Okay. So this is going to be your sort of a crash course of sorts on writing answers. And then we'll start with the agenda of the day. I thought that now it is important because otherwise it will be too late. What is an answer? You see, all of you have read a lot of material. All of you have a lot of notes. Those notes are not my answers. Every question has a certain context demand. For example, there is a question on Taylor or Foley or Gulick or Fayol. That does not mean that you end up writing everything about those thinkers. Whatever you know, most of you will end up vomiting the same thing on the paper. That is not demanded. As part of NPM, I saw that a lot of you said, oh, it was a reinvention, it was a new paradigm, this and that. And you were typically writing the notes without actually addressing the question. So we will take this up with a simple, analogy. that ultimately an answer is a single piece. Remember that. There might be parts, subparts, directive words, discuss, critically analyze, etc. I'm not getting into what does critically analyze mean, what does that, discuss mean. I guess all of you know that. It's a single piece. So no matter how many parts are there, those parts are related. And we need to remember that. So your answer should appear as an integrated, well-rounded piece. It should not appear that, okay, I have addressed the parts, now you combine it. The reader or the evaluator will combine it. No. So I will take an example. So Vivek, tell me the name of your best friend. Ashutosh. So I'll just call Ashu, okay, for the convenience sake. So a friend here, Vivek, who's in the classroom, has a friend called Ashu. While writing the answer, you have to be like a deft lawyer. Because you are arguing a case. Okay. So let us assume a hypothetical scenario. Long live Ashutosh. Okay. So the case is that Ashutosh has been murdered on the night of 30th June brutally by stabbing from a dagger. It might sound absurd, okay? Just follow my lead. And Vivek has been accused of that murder, that in a fit of rage over who will drive the car, and they all were in inebriated state, and Vivek ended up murdering Ashutosh. Now I am the defense lawyer, and of course there is a prosecution. Now remember the 70s, 80s, 90s movie, courtroom dramas. Okay, so the question here is that Ashutosh has been murdered, Vivek has been accused of the murder, certain circumstances of murder are being postulated, that on a rainy night of 30th of June, on the small quarrel of who will drive the car in a fit of rage, Vivek ended up stabbing Ashutosh with a dagger. Is Vivek the real murderer? I mean, whether Vivek is guilty or not, that's the moot question. So, this 70s, 80s, 90s courtroom drama opens. Camera pans, long shot, court there. Okay. So, the defense lawyer, that is I, will say that, my lord, in this temple of justice, we all have been gathered because my friend or my client, Vivek, has been accused of brutally murdering his childhood friend Ashutosh on the night of the 30th of June in a rainy, stormy weather on a small quarrel of who will drive the car. And it is accused that my client stabbed his friend mercilessly using a dagger. But today, in this honorable court, I will prove that my client Vivek is not guilty. ऐसे ही होता है ना स्टार्ट, जज साहब आज इस इंसाफ के मंदिर में हम इसलिए इकट्ठे हुए क्योंकि मेरे मौके ये वो. So this was your introduction. Your introduction of the answer should clearly lay bare the demand of the question and should hint what you are about to do. Okay? Understood? Good afternoon, friends who are watching online. This is my introduction. Broadly speaking, we can broadly say that answer is intro, body, conclusion. Right? किसी भी written piece का, for any written piece, there will be a context setting, a body and. So this was my intro. Now between intro and body, when I say that today I will prove that my client Vivek is innocent, I need a bridge. It cannot be like that. No, this is ending abruptly. So your answer should be a smoothly flowing written piece. It should not have bumps because they take away the attention. You read any good editorial by, let us say, C. Raja Mohan, or a piece by Shashi Tharoor or Sanjeev Sanyal, etc. They are well written, well rounded pieces. So there should be a connecting line. And to prove this, I would like to present certain evidences and witnesses in front of the Honorable Court. Right? So your body is nothing but it's an exercise of proof and prove. Proof how? Through data, examples, arguments, deductions, and all of it should be logical. Okay? And you prove it. Now, the defense lawyer will say, and to prove my point, he will postulate a theory. My client is innocent, my lord, for the reason that on the night of the murder, my client was not present in the city. So if my client was not in the city, how can he murder his beloved friend? So you're postulating a grand theory and then you prove it. So proof and proof. And to prove this point, let me tell you, my client was holidaying in Thailand, Bangkok. Okay? Here are his boarding passes, CCTV footage of hotel lobby, and to further cement this point, I would like to call Miss Lin Chin Chow, the receptionist at the Taj Hotel in Pattaya. Right? Things like that. So you are postulating a theory and you are proving it. You are deducting it, basically. That means here, as part of the, should I raise this? Here, as part of the body, you are trying to answer three pertinent questions. That is, what, why, and how. And this will make up for my analysis. When I keep saying that you don't have analysis, you will use thinkers, scholars, examples, data, facts, logic, statements, quotes, anything. A good idea to enrich this body is to use illustrations and diagrams. Now look, while doing so, be somewhat professional. Professional in the sense that, let us say you are drawing a line diagram. Okay, some flow is happening. Label it. Figure A. label it, and link it with what you are writing. Some of you often asked, point is better or paragraph? I say hybrid. Point plus paragraph. When you are trying to analyze, use paragraph. When you are trying to provide info, that is the what aspect, use points or figures and cross-refer them. As shown in figure A, the basic postulates of the Taylorism are this, they link to or they are present even in the modern era. Link it. It will look so professional, you see. Also, to highlight a point, what you can do is that if this is your, sheet, you can make boxes. And within box, you can provide something. So it actually makes your answer far more readable. Any figure, illustration gets an instant connect with the reader rather than this. You see, I am not doubting your intelligence or what you have written. I am actually trying to hit at the perception of the examiner, because that person is also a human being. If we are easily able to convey that person what we want to, our job is done. Right. Also, images and these illustrations and diagrams are a cheat technique. Cheat technique because nobody is going to count the words in those images. So your answer will feel diversified. It will not feel very word heavy. So some people write small, some people write in bigger font, some people like congested, some people, space it very liberally, balance it out. Nobody in the examination is actually counting the words like 1, 2, 3, 4, no. It is always perceptible. So with individuals who have checked thousands of copies like me, we can gauge that whether the answer is within the word limit or is it crossing the word. It's based on perception, perceptibility. Okay. So that is something that you should be very careful about, how to use boxes, figures, cross-reference them, deduce them. If you are deducing something, why not make a deduction chart? Something like this. And you can cross-refer it. Like I said, with the case example between Vivek and Ashutosh or Ashu. So now what is happening? Defense, that is me, is presenting my arguments. The prosecution will cross-examine. Right? That means you are deducing, you are trying to arrive somewhere. Okay? So that's my body. There is no hard and fast rule that, okay, in 150 answer, I will write 30 words in intro, 40 words in conclusion, and sort of 80 words in body. No. As long as it is making sense, as long as it is there, 5-10 words here and there don't matter. Alright. Also, often in 10 markers, you have a lot to convey but very little space. So these tactics can help you. You can draw a table, you can draw a figure, a line diagram, a flow chart. Okay? Characteristics, for example, something related to NPM and its characteristics is there. So why not NPM characteristics, this tick, 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 box, analysis here. So that presents a smart view. So the flow should be proper. It should not be like a random thing. It should be clear that A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. Just like we do mathematical derivations. हम निकालते ना A plus B whole square. निकालते हैं? Or we do it A plus B plus C whole square. Let A be is equals to X, X plus C whole square. X square plus C square plus 2XC. Then we will put X is A plus B whole square plus C square plus 2 into A plus B into C. This is how we do it. This is how we do it in mathematics. So it should be logical. The flow should be very logical, right from introduction, body to and conclusion. Also, please, it's a request with folded hands. Do not write like this. Intro, body. Do not write like this. Okay. Now, once you have indulged in this exercise of prove and proof, vice versa, then we have to write a conclusion. So, what is happening in the case? That the defense, that is me, is presenting the case. The prosecution is obviously cross-examining. And somehow through these proofs, I am establishing that Vivek was partying in Thailand on a beach in Pattaya, and he certainly cannot kill Ashutosh in Delhi. Okay. Now, what will be the conclusion? Conclusion is something that you take the leaf out of the context setting and the introduction. It is like, look, I told you. So the lawyer in that dramatic scene will be like, my lord, ये सारे सबूत और गवाह चीख चीख के कह रहे हैं, all these evidences and witnesses are establishing this fact that my client Vivek was not in the town. Look at his face. He's so distraught that his childhood friend is no more. Therefore, I will request the Honorable Court to honorably discharge my client Vivek and instruct the police to find the real culprit. So your conclusion should be balanced, positive, action oriented. Remember, there is a cliche term which some of the senior aspirants would know. That is a way forward. This was a trend which was started by somebody, I do not know whom, that we will write way forward, we will underline it, and then we will write 4 points. Please. That is not needed. If it is needed by the demand that suggests a way forward, what should be done? You can use it. Now, in the larger scheme of things, intro, body, conclusion, you can put this way forward before conclusion, you can put this way forward after conclusion, or you can fuse it with conclusion, just like I did in this example. That you tell the police to do this, this, this. Understood? This is how an answer should be written. Any queries whatsoever from this? Hi Devyanshi. So Devyanshi, Anhe, Saurabh. Any queries before I move ahead? See, how creative you can get is up to you. Like I said, use a box, underline the important words, label it, label the figures to look professional. Okay, things like that. Good afternoon. Right, it is up to you. The more conveniently you will, communicate the idea, the more easily it is there. And please, it is not to suggest that we write flowery language. Is MR simple kind of English, but it should be pabadish. एग्जाम्पल किस स्टैंडर्ड के कोट कर सकते हैं? यू कैन कोट एनी एग्जाम्पल which is established. For example, if I am actually quoting a regulatory agency as a public watchdog, okay, right? Example, box. Recent action by the what was that? Competition Commission of India on XYZ. This is my example done. Okay, you can write it like this. Understood? Okay. So you can quote any example that way, Saurabh, depends on the context. Ultimately, everything should be the question. And please, while you are writing this intro, body, conclusion, your entire answer, it should be topical. Topical would entail two things. First, the question will relate to some part of the syllabus, some concepts directly or indirectly. So, concept or set of concepts. And there would be a context of the question itself, that it is asking you to look at it in a particular dimension. Let us say looking at the Taylorism and Weberianism, right? Or looking at NPM or NPA. So it is looking at a contextual sense, a comparative sense. So your entire this thing should time and again reinforce that. It should not be a loose thread that, okay, I am drawing the comparison, just like that I drew a table, that's fine. It should reinforce the context. Anything and everything that is outside the periphery of this might be true, might be correct, might be a very fantastic point, but it is not needed by me, because my question sets the boundary by the context. Okay, so this is something that needs to be understood. Next, I just want to give a disclaimer that this thing will not come like this. Okay, so practice. And you can practice this technique anywhere. When I say that there is a concept, try and root your answer in a conceptual logic, because it is agreed by the entire discipline and it cannot be disputed. Okay. Koi nahi, Saurabh, we'll look at that issue. We'll have a look at that issue. Now, consistency is the key. Okay. So try and write 10 to 20 answers a day. What I mean is mix, apart from your regular test series that you are doing. Okay, you can attempt PYQs or whatever across GS, optional. Okay. Now, how to write? And our target is less than 7 minutes. Now, a mistake that 95% of you do is that you see the question and you start writing. So most of the time, you are thinking and writing simultaneously. While revising, start preparing short, crisp notes, okay, for quick revision. That's the background practice of it. Now, what we need not do is think and write simultaneously. First think, then write. Try this exercise. It will take some time. Initially, it might take 10, 11, 12 minutes. But once you get used to it, you are going to benefit out of it. Those who are thinking that they are taking 20 odd minutes, stick to what you are doing. Now is not the time that we train you. But this is something that can be done in 2-3 days. Right? So if you can, then please do it. Now what you have to do, and we are looking at 7 minutes, that is less than 7 minutes. You have a question. Please remember, the question can be a very short one. Okay? Administration is administration, nothing public or private about it, comment. Or it can be a long one. Long, I would mean long read. So whenever it's a short one, take a rough paper, not physically, in your brain, and write the concept and context. If it's a long one, while you are reading it, first reading, and whatever context or concept you are getting, start deconstruction of question. In figure, okay, A leads to B, then this is getting diversified into C and D. D is dependent on C, C is independent of D. Like this. Somehow in a pictorial breakup form. Then once you do it, read the question again. And then whatever comes in your brain, whatever means whatever, name of your pet, okay, favorite movie, anything that comes into your brain, just scribble. Scribble on this very sheet. Anywhere, random. Why I am using the example of sheet? For initial 20-30 questions, you can take the help of another sheet. Okay, but gradually we need to get rid of this paper and do this thing in brain. Okay, so let's say I have scribbled A, B, C, D, E, F, K, M, O, U, V, I, Z. Okay, I've scribbled these things. Now read the question again. Third reading. Now whatever is needed. For example, the question is on NPM. Okay, for NPM you know thousands of things. But not everything is within the remit of the question. We have identified the concept, the context. So I will strike down some things. Then what I will do? I will order this thing in the order that I need these things. I will make an order that I will write, okay, A, then I will talk about K, then I will talk about D, then I will talk about C, M is my example. Okay, then I will talk about E, then I will talk about V. Z is something I can make a figure. And link Z with D. Now, once you have prioritized the order, so the flow of the arguments is organized, right? This has happened. Now I will attach weights. That okay, this is a central point. I will talk more. This is a cursory point. I will talk very less. This is something which is indispensable, but I don't have the room. So I will just mention it. See, please understand, while we are talking about it, it is taking so much of, detailed analysis, because I'm trying to break down that entire process into smaller fragments, into smaller frames, so that you understand. Okay, and once you have done it, It will be like the school times when you used to cheat in the exam and used to tell your friends that, bro, just tell me the headings, I will write on my own. So you have separated the grain from the chaff. You have discarded things which might be correct but not required for my answer. You have ordered it, you have measured it. Now you just have to write based on these parts. And it will automatically make a coherent piece. Sandwich this between a contextual intro and a good conclusion, and you are done. Understood? Understood this part. Now, for the first reading and deconstruction can be done in 1.5 minutes. Okay? Next, so you read, think, okay. Read again, think again. Then read again and draw the structure. So anything and everything related to this can be done under 3 minutes. और चलो खींच के पकड़ते 3.5. Then 3 minutes are enough to write 325 to 350 words. I am taking the biggest question that you will end up facing. Because once you know क्या लिखना है, फिर तो बचा ही नहीं ना कुछ. There's nothing left. Now there are certain precautions. Think in this first 3.5 minutes. Don't think after that. Then just write. If you will keep thinking, because there is a greed to write the best answer, no. We are not looking for the best governance, we are looking for good enough governance here. Because you will be doing this at the cost of other answers and you will never be able to complete the paper. 1. 2. I have 5 fingers, with all due respect. Anybody, please don't label me as somebody, who makes fun of other people. But if I attach a 6th finger, will that make me Hrithik Roshan? No, right? It will look absurd. Okay. Similarly, when you have already decided the flow, the order of arguments, the seriousness of the arguments, and you suddenly come up with a point because you are thinking while writing, desist from it. You will certainly try and squeeze some other point which is not balanced as per the larger equation. So that will look as an appendage. When we read it, we get that. अच्छा ये afterthought था. पहले नहीं सोचा इसने. He hasn't think it through. This is an afterthought. We immediately get it while reading the answer. Okay, avoid it unless and until suddenly something pops up in your mind which can drastically alter that superb kind of a point. Okay, always order your arguments from higher to lower. Don't give the lower pedestrian arguments first and the important arguments later. No. Okay, so this is how progressively you will be able to reduce time, because you are thinking and writing separately. So while thinking, don't write, and while writing, don't think. See, this is the only way that at least I know in which you can write 3,000 odd words. ऐसे ही होता है ना? 4,000 rather. 4,000 words in 180 minutes. Do the math. So this is the only way that you can write these 4,000 odd words, and that too sense in those 3 hours. So if we have to attempt 20 questions. We'll be completing our paper in 140 minutes. How many minutes do we have? 180. So my idea has always been in life to promise less and deliver more. Okay. Still 40 minutes are left. Because in the examination, you'll be writing the answers. There will be people, who will come to you to take signatures. There will be a senior government official who's there just to take a round.
It distracts.
So it distracts. You never know in which school you are or in which premises you are actually taking that, exam. The exam is going to be in winters. There might be a broken window from which cold air is coming in. You are actually having something and a Mata ki Chauki is going on, or Azan is going on, or a Jagran is going on, or a prayer is going on, or simply a birthday party is going on somewhere where loud music is being played. The invigilator is cranky. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Don't do this, don't do that. Right? You never know. So I am discounting those 40 minutes for that. Okay, there can be other blunders that can happen, that your pen suddenly stops working. Okay, so be prepared for it. Always promise less, deliver more. So we have set our target for 140 minutes. There are 19 questions to be answered in one paper of public administration. You can do that very well in, if I say, 2.5 hours. And always, if you have the spare time, just if you can do certain last minute enhancement, read whatever have you written, and if you want, you can underline certain places. So these last minutes which are left will help you there. Okay, feel free to use trees. Okay, these are the consequences, issues, like that. No issues. Ultimately, it's a form of communication. The better you communicate to me, the better I understand what you think. And there is no other interface apart from that piece of paper. Okay? Remember, your tone, tonality, facial expressions, nothing is visible. Okay? So be very diligent. Use correct punctuation, for example. So if I see you, both are different. Both are different. Right? What matters? Punctuation. तो आहट और आहट दो अलग अलग बातें हैं. All right. So these are the things that you should be cognizant of. Has everybody understood? Friends watching us online, have you all understood how we need to actually go about answer writing, how we need to approach the answers? Rest is the knowledge part and your creativity. Right? You can see some of the toppers' copies as well. In the Telegram group, I have shared the toppers' handbook in which I have curated certain answers. So have a look at that. So you will see how they are actually presenting the line of argument. Remember, a lot of you start with the definition. Has the definition been asked? This should be your first question. Okay? If it is asked, okay. You can use the definition, otherwise later. If by reading your introduction, I cannot reverse engineer the question, your introduction is flawed. By reverse engineering, I do not mean exactly verbatim. If I cannot derive the sense of the question by your introduction is not very optimal. Okay? If your body just has info, that is the what aspect, but lacks the how and why aspect. And remember, the distribution of what, why and how will again depend on the nature of the question. There cannot be a ratio that, okay, we will do for this, to this. No. There cannot be a ratio. But if it has only information, not the analysis, and it is not reinforcing the context or the demand, then it is merely an information or a set of notes for me. Hanji. Understood? So I hope you all have noted down the do's and don'ts, that we should not make sudden appendages, how we should write, what should be the components. Okay? And then depending upon the nature of the subject, you can get creative. For example, if there are, geography questions which are talking about clouds, make certain clouds. No? Who's stopping? Okay. Anay, Divyanshi, Saurabh, understood? This process can easily make a difference in the entire scheme of things, the way you are writing, apart from whatever knowledge base you have. 50 to 70 marks across. It depends. I mean, GS 1, 2, 3, 60 questions. Optional, let us take a round figure, another, 40 questions. Ethics, essay. Okay, so we are dealing with roughly 120 questions directly, then ethics essay is different. So even if following this logical approach can gain you half a mark per question, 60. And most of you are senior aspirants, not the first timers. You all are aware that 60 marks can make a big difference. Big difference between you being on that list or you not being on that list. Big difference in you being an IPS officer and saluting an IAS officer, or you being an IAS officer taking the salute. Okay? Dhyan rakhna. The IPS pulls the strings of the flag, the IAS salutes it. Okay? Alright. So with this understanding, try it out and see how it works for you. Okay? Let us move towards our set of scholars, and the first one is scientific management. Our very own friend Taylor. F.W. Taylor. You see, scientific management as a movement was both a theory and practice. First, we need to understand this. It was both theory and practice. The initial idea was to increase labor productivity. Initial idea. But later the scope expanded to all the functions or the factors, processes which are part of the organization. It was necessitated by the fact because in the later, part of the 19th century, 1850 and beyond, The US, and please understand, so pardon my poor map skills. If this I say is North America, this I say is South America, this is US. Increasing migration from colonies was happening. Right. Also for the fact that the industrial operations, the industrial climate was such that the organizations were getting complex. And this gives rise to the coming up of a managerial class. Okay. So now you were not looking at solving day-to-day problems. You were taking a broader, long-term view. Okay, so there was this gentleman, Henry R. Town, Towne. And there was this another Henry called Henry Metcalfe. And they started looking at a unified system of management. And Town actually coined the idea, science of management. Taylor got inspired by these individuals and started working on the idea of scientific management. But while they postulated the idea, Taylor was somebody who matured the idea, and hence he is known as the father of scientific management. The term, so they talked about science of management. The term scientific management got coined by Louis Brandeis in 1910. Scientific management we often equate with Taylorism for the fact that it was Taylor whose ideas impacted the scientific management the most. It was his ideas that laid the foundational basis of scientific management. And also it was Taylor who was one of the most vociferous advocates of the systematic adoption of these methods across the value chain of industry, the processes, management, etc., to promote efficiency and economy. Like I said, Taylor wasn't the first, but he was the first to give the comprehensive blueprint. If you look, Metcalfe, Town, Charles Babbage, etc., all of them, talked about it. Okay. So Taylor believed. So just a question. I remember something. Have you made that list of quotes? Have you made that list of quotes? दिखाना मेरे को. Share it with me. Okay. And some of you are sending those answers without keeping the test series ID in CC. Right? So let me repeat that again. 2 will be to abhishiekh@basix.in, and there has to be a CC, test series @iesscore.in. Make sure you do that. The first class has the instructions as well. Okay. So Taylor believed so whatever quotes I will give, I need 100-worder on those quotes. Okay. So Taylor believed that best management is true science. And he thought that such an idea was applicable to all the human activities. So the initial cradle of the scientific management as a substantive idea was US, and from there it spread to other countries. I'm not getting into the biography of Taylor. He was born here, there, he studied in Germany, France, वगैरह वगैरह. I'm not getting into it. Okay. His important works: A Piece Rate System, 1895, Shop Management, 1903, The Art of Cutting Metals, 1906, Principles of Scientific Management, 1911. Okay, what was the thrust? Clear laws and principles with universal applicability. That was at the essence. Clear laws, rules, principles as foundation. Okay. With the social view, he said that the same laws and principles can be applied in any social activities, whether it is the management of our homes, the management of our farms, businesses, churches, universities, etc. Now, what were the views that were happening? Workers actually believed that the improved performance or the increased output will lead to unemployment. And hence the problem. The workers were avoiding the work systematically. Okay? And that's called as soldiering. Soldiering again is of two types: natural and systematic. Natural would be to natural tendency that we call as a BAU approach, business as usual. चल रहा है, चलने दो, जैसा चल रहा है वैसा चलने दो. Status quoism, lethargy. Okay, to take it easy, not to overexert. Okay, whereas systematic soldiering is something which is motivated. By what? Group factors. Okay, lack of systematization was there. Skill gap was again an issue. Lack of incentives. And basically, scientific management tried to take up these issues and resolve these issues. What was the modus operandi of scientific management? Observation and analysis. Observation and analysis. Okay. What does scientific management assumes? It assumes that once you apply the scientific method of analysis, it will lead to solutions to bring about higher productivity. Another assumption is that the focus is on the work itself and not on the particular person doing the work. So you see, whatever analysis are happening, that are happening on the nature of the work, not the worker. So it ignores this element by assumption. Also, the job focus blurs the idea of cooperation and integration at the higher levels. It assumes that every worker is an economic man. So it takes the rationality in the classical sense. It is not focusing on the motivation, morale, and other complex social factors contributing. Emphasis is on science for each element of a person's work. Scientific selection, training, and development. Division of work between management and workers. And for this, he was doing what? He was taking up time and motion studies. There was a wage incentive system. He was looking at the organization from a functional perspective. So, a functional organizational structure. That whole functional foremanship and other concepts. Here, like I said, I will not get into every nitty-gritty of it. I would like to emphasize certain principles. The first one being the exception principle. According to Taylor, the manager should be most interested in exceptional items that vary from the standard. Why? Because the other tasks are to be routinized. So instead of bulky managerial reports, what matters, what makes the difference, what are non-standard should be there, and that is what the exceptional principle is. Also, if we look at the leadership style, I made you write that we will have to compare, right? So for example, if I say a Taylorian organization, I will say it's a theory X kind of an organization. Okay, so that linkage should be made. So the leadership is what? Autocratic largely. Okay, hire and fire policy. Right. Now there are several critiques of Taylor, several critiques of Taylor. Okay, but let us look at the more prominent ones. You see, the most prominent one is that when we say that Taylor took human beings as cog in the wheels, he neglected the human element, the social element. He takes a mechanistic view. He takes man only as an economic man. So if one worker has become dysfunctional, remove that person, bring in a new person, just like you replace a spare part. Okay? So behaviorals actually critique Taylor by saying that by ignoring such elements, he actually stifled the human initiative spirit, freedom. Their intelligence, the intelligence of the human being was not given due consideration. It led to many neurological and psychological, problems because of the personalized nature of the work, depersonalized nature of the work. While the division into planning and executive divisions hampered the development of team spirit. He antagonized the trade unions to an extent that in 1912 a committee had to be set up by the United States Congress to examine Taylorian ideas. And they also criticized the mechanical nature of the Taylorian system. Even at the managerial level, that level was also disenchanted with the idea because it took up their discretion and autonomy. Systems theory criticized, or the system schools of theorists criticize Taylor because it fails to factor in the environment in his analysis. In the long run, in the present scheme of things, the analysts say that the Taylorism actually led to exploitation of workers. Please understand, they are not finding fault with Taylor's idea because the idea was mathematical, scientific. Okay, if I say that two atoms come together and an atomic fusion happen and heat is released, the idea is not good or bad, the idea is scientific. But the way you use it as a fusion atomic bomb, that can be problematic. Okay, So that is there. So while the managers, the workers, all of them were disenchanted, but Taylor's work continued to remain very relevant. Okay? Because first time elements like merit-based recruitment, training, placement in the organizational structure, rewards, fines, techniques for work management were given a methodical consideration. And therefore, we say that the scientific management did not remain just an idea in the larger scheme of things. It became a movement. It created the backbone for the new engineers that were coming up. So, our very own Drucker says that the main aim of Taylor's work was the need to substitute industrial warfare by industrial harmony. So, in the era of industrial warfare, Taylorism was actually looking to provide solutions to bring about industrial harmony. See, I know that all of you know this, but terminologies like these can really help you write better answers. Also, stress on research, planning, standardization, cooperation, etc. So it brought drastic changes, in that era with regards to minimizing of wastage, valuing of human effort. The labor started getting higher wages, better placements were there. Okay. So research, standards, planning, control, collaboration between labor and management. Okay. So across the government departments also, remember this was also an age when Wilson was actually looking to reform the American administration. So across government departments, various committees were set up to examine how the government functioning can be improved. Okay. Then let's now look at the classical idea. So this was the SMT. Now let us look at CMT, the classical ideas. Fayol, Gulick, Arvik, etc. But before I move ahead, let me know if any one of you have any doubts. Any doubts? Okay.
So you can say that SMM was basically very good for the managers and industrialists rather than for the workers.
You can say that to an extent because it was the workers. But remember, I made you a point that even managers were disenchanted because the scientificism was restricting their discretion and autonomy. Right. So to suggest and give it a blanket that it was beneficial for them and not beneficial for others would not be a very right way to assess this. The better way to assess it would be that how it impacted the organizational productivity, efficiency, economy, etc. Right? Because through the new system, everybody had to adjust. Okay, so that would be a far more balanced, approach. The managers being at the higher echelons were certainly better off than a petty worker.
Especially the timing was also that US was trying to be the industrial hub of the world.
Right. That is there. So any which ways, the workers were not very well off. Okay. So while the SMT focused on science, the CMT, that is the classical theories or the classical management theory, they were looking in the formalization of organizational structures. And processes. And this structure and management process oriented approach is called as the classical approach or the classical theory. People like March and Simon actually calls this as administrative management theory. Now, like I said, they were looking at structures and processes. So what was the quest in which these theories were working? That is the formulation of certain universal principles. Universal principles of organization. That if these principles are established, these principles are followed, an organization will be able to attain its objectives. So again, focusing on efficiency, effectiveness, economy. Okay. So the structuralist approach or the structuralist school within the CMT actually was concerned with discovering the true basis on which the work can be divided, or the methods for that division of work. So it is this classical management theory, through the empiricism, through the idea of structural division of work, through the idea of reforming the processes, through the idea of universalization of principle, brought in the scientific element to the administration, which was hitherto largely considered as an art. ओके बात समझ में आई? Now let us take up first caller in this. Fayol. That is Henry Fayol. Okay, he was a pragmatist. He was looking at practical issues of management and how certain methods can bring about improvement. Okay. So with regards to Fayol, he was focusing on functional distribution of work. So Fayol actually classified the works on functional lines. Technical, commercial, financial, security, accounting, and administrative. The administrative would entail the managerial activities in this case. Also, the significance of this managerial activity increases as one goes upwards towards the hierarchy. Also, Fayol suggests that the manager should have certain attributes. Okay, the physical attributes like health, vigor, appearance, mental, attributes, ability to learn, ability to judge. There should be moral quality as well, firmness, willingness, a general education, special knowledge, experience. So he gives a framework of POCCC. Okay? POCCC. Whereas this has been given by Gulick and Arvik. Okay, along with it, the 14 principles of organization. I'll quickly read them. Division of work, authority and responsibility, discipline, unity of command, unity of direction, subordination of individual interest to general interest, centralization, remuneration, scalar chain. Scalar chain is what? Hierarchy. So whenever we talk about CMT and Weberian, that means the scalar chain principle. Also, if I talk about the modern organizations, right? Decentralized, not decentralized, let us say e-governance. Isn't there also a hierarchy element? कैसे? कैसे? So we are looking at Weberian, CMT. Within CMT, we are looking at Fayol, and we have came to know that this is scalar chain. Weberian is hierarchy. Now I am looking at e-governance. Can we say e-governance is flatter? Or should we say that e-governance is a flatter idea? There are no elements of hierarchy in e-governance. सोचो, friends who are online think.
E-governance is a provider and an acceptor. There is a
E-governance is a facilitator, right? But are there any hierarchies or not? Actually, write down another homework. First one was the explanation of the quotes. Till we are doing thinkers, every thinker a quote, 100-word explainer. Second homework, find out the similarities and differences between e-governance and CMT, classical management theory. Okay. Order, equity, stability of tenure, initiative, esprit de corps. Whenever we talk about stability of tenure, can we link it with security of tenure argument in civil services? Personnel administration, personnel management, right? So there you can use FAOL. Also, while largely the CMT is looking at principles, SMT is looking at one best way, and it is to suggest that this SMT had a penetration with the larger idea of CMT, right? We cannot say that CMT does not have SMT. But is FAOL looking at absolutism like one best way? No. FAOL is not an absolutist. He says that there is nothing absolute in management. And hence, FAOL says that the management should keep a room for changing circumstances. Seldom you can apply the same thing again and again. So can we say that the CMT vision of FAOL was ecologically sensitive? Right? Are bhai, right or wrong? Right now? Hanji, friends watching online, right? Yes, Anay, you are right partly, but we will have to think it in the line of the larger theoretical idea, the CMT and e-governance. Okay. Again, Fayol also emphasized on training. He attached great importance to the staff ideas. Now, interesting comparison has to be drawn between Fayol and Taylor. And here we are looking at the SMT, and here we are looking at the CMT. Often I have come across many students who have gone through the foundation of public administration, but they think that the SMT and CMT are same things. Right? Some students have this confusion because both we refer to broadly as classical ideas or old ideas. Okay, but there were certain differences, and through Taylor and Fayol we can at least broadly draw the differences between the CMT and the SMT but in particular about Fayol and Taylor. Okay. So you see, when Fayol was working, Fayol was in Europe. His outlook gets shaped by a relatively stable business environment. Whereas Taylor was working at a time of turmoil. Okay, so this is the difference. See, why I want to share this. This will not be utilized like this in the exam, but that helps you actually peep into the mind of the individual, whether Taylor or Fayol. What will that person be thinking? If you will start thinking like that, then you will be able to better, grasp the theories. Okay. So this actually background frames how they assume the stuff. So while Fayol is looking from the top of the organization, from the managerial level, Taylor is looking at it from the shop floor level. So you see, ideas of Fayol and Taylor actually complement. Okay? They actually complement, because one is looking at it from the top, other one is looking at it from the bottom. Both use a mechanistic approach and both are relevant even today. Okay? So Taylor is actually having a bottom up view, whereas Fayol is having a top down view. You see, what is the focus? Taylor is focusing on every activity. How a screw is being tightened, how a plank is being cut, micro activity. So the focus of Taylor is micro, whereas Fayol is looking at the broader general principles of management. So Fayol's focus is macro. So Taylor has a rigid approach, whereas Fayol has a somewhat flexible approach. Told you the ecology of aspect. Okay? Taylor stressed on the efficiency of workers and managers, where actual production was going on. Whereas Fayol is actually stressing on the functions of the management. Taylor uses simplification and standardization as ideas. Whereas Fayol's view is a far broader, holistic, comprehensive view of the administration. Taylor's view is technical in nature, whereas Fayol's view is administrative in nature. Key principle, Taylor, functional foremanship. Henry Fayol, unity of command. So the distribution based on the work which is happening. Understood? Just like Taylor, Fayol has also not escaped the criticism. Okay. Peter Drucker actually criticizes Fayol for imposing a mechanistic model. He says that Fayol's ideas were shaped by his own experiences and not by the scientific observations. So those ideas were applicable to smaller organizations, not pan-national organizations, not for complex organizations. Again, the human relationist would say that the Fayol has ignored the socio-psychological aspect. Also, certain inherent contradictions in the Fayol's ideas. For example, between unity of command and unity of direction. Then again, people like Bernard say that what Fayol is looking at is only a formal part of the organization. He ignores the informal part. Similar is the criticism of Simon. So they say that what Fayol says are good for theory, but in real life they are not practicable. But there were certain positive appraisals as well. First time the organizational management was being thought out as a separate, distinct, focused activity of study. A theory which is comprehensive, which deals with all aspects of the management. Okay? Also, while saying this, the Fayol's principles were flexible and therefore provided easy adaptability across organizational scenarios. Also, it formed the background which provided a separate identity to management to be taught, to be trained. Okay? Understood? Now, let us take up Gulick. Gulick and Arvik. Both we know, all of us know that it is about post decorp. But Gulick and Arvik, especially Gulick, actually also thought about things like unity of command, line and staff, span of control, HQ and field relations, departmentalization, also the 4 P's, that is purpose, process, person, place. You see, all of it can be used in paper 2, structures of the state government, central government, headquarter field relationships, okay, line and staff agencies. departmentalization. Also, vis-a-vis, Gulick also had a managerial view, just like Fayol. But he talked extensively about the reform. Rationalization of workforce is being talked about when he says that multiple units performing similar functions should be kept together in boards and commissions. Okay. Now let us have a brief critical evaluation of Gulick and Arvik. They say, the critics say, that the principles lack the scientific orientation. Why? Because they were random. They were based on rule of thumb. They are like, rules of conduct. They are not principles. It does not give about the principles by Gulick and Arvik does not talk about the structure of the organization, how the functions are to be divided, etc. Also, they do not deal with the informal aspects of the organization. Fail to recognize motivation, morale, and those aspects. Okay. Now, let us take a general appraisal of sorts of the CMT, that is the classical management theory or the classical theory. So, while the classical ideas, the critics say that they overly emphasized on the formal structure and underestimated the importance of human factors, informal groups, lack of attention to social, psychological factors. Okay. They say that the Fayolism is nothing but a unidimensional idea of management. It does not reflect the reality. It was for a simple mining organization, they say. But it does not reflect the reality of operations in today's complex organizations, dynamic organizations, entrepreneurial organization. They say that the Fayol's functional principles are not functioning anymore in these. Functionalism, they say, the Fayolian or the Fayolism's functionalism is one of the many principles. It is not the principle as Fayol touted it to be. Okay? Simon says that the CMT was narrow and lacked realism. He says principles like unity of command are incompatible with principles of dual chain of command, specialization, etc. They say that this is nothing. Simon says that this is nothing and he terms it as folk wisdom. He terms it as folk wisdom. He says that these theories are homely proverbs, myths, slogans, and pompous inanities. Pompous inanities. Should I write that down? Okay. He says that they lack the scientificism. Alright. He says that these principles comes in pairs. For every principle there is a contradictory principle. So Simon has criticized heavily these CMT chaps. Okay. Chester Bernard and again Simon says that this so-called managerial organization cannot be explained in terms of just the principles. It does not cater to or factor in the behavior of the organizational participants. Arguris actually is disputing the idea between the needs of the individuals working in these organizations and what organizational principles are dictating. He says that there is a mismatch, incompatibility. Some Indian scholars like V. Subramaniam say that these principles of the CMT, they lack the sophistication of a theory. They are like common knowledge, GK, common GK. Also, they treat organization as a closed system. So they are not ecological. March and Simon call it the machine model. Call it the machine model. Warren Bennis. So this will help you in analysis. That is why I'm naming the thinkers. Warren Bennis says that the focus of the classical theory is on organizations without people. Also, the theory is atomistic. It sees an individual in isolation, mechanistic, static, closed. Rationalistic. It deals with only the formal organization. It is concerned with what ought to be rather than what is. Okay. This is the CMT. Next was the Weberian idea, which is given in your syllabus. Weber is somebody that we have already dealt with. Okay. post-Weberian, Weberian ideas we have already dealt. Okay, but just to give certain pointers, we will talk about the critique of Weber. Though we have dealt that through the paradigms and through NPM and other stuff that we were doing, the post-Weberian organization, neo-Weberian organizations. But it is important that we take up a few scholars. You see, under question, whenever we look at Weber's model, was the idea of rationality. So if I have to organize the Weberian criticism, I can take three broader themes. The idea of rationality. So people were actually questioning whether what is being touted as rational is really rational. Okay. Also, the adaptability of Weberian model as per the ecology, the changing times, different social economic conditions, and the efficiency part. And the efficiency part. Okay. Merton, Robert Merton, says that the so-called Weberian rationality can lead to dysfunctional consequences. Selznick actually says that while there is a rule-directed distribution of work functions, there is hierarchy. So these subordinate entities that are coming up can actually create their own goals, which might be in conflict with the larger organizational goal. So at the core of it, whether we talk about Merton or Selznick, they say that this formal specification as part of the organizational structure based on the Weberian ideology might be insufficient, as there are characteristics beyond. Next, Talcott Parsons. सुना है इसके बारे में? Talcott Parsons. Actually, he was one of the people involved in translation of Weber's works. So Weber was writing in German. I hope you all know that. Okay. That is why we say that the Weberian ideas took time to actually reach at other places, because English or French were largely the lingua franca across the world. So he says that Weber says that administrative staff should be technically superior and all of them should have the right to give orders. But this can lead to conflict. right? Because often you never know that in an hierarchy, the higher one, who's positionally higher, can have the requisite skill set. Then it can lead to confusion, who to rely upon. The person who is at a commanding position, or a person who has the expertise. So often when we look at the politico-administration fusion, we can face this conflict where a minister or a public representative is a generalist. He might not be a technical expert, but a bureaucrat is a technical expert.
We have such scenarios.
We have had such scenarios where ministers were talking absolutely, illogical stuff, and administration has to bear the brunt. Okay. Next, why am I focusing on Weber's critique? Simple reason, it is asked in the examination a lot. Okay. Then Gudner, Blau, and again Parsons. They say that the obsession with rules can lead to delays. Obsession with rules can lead to delays, as rules are inflexible. So what will happen, especially in public service delivery with a client orientation? So if NPM, under NPM, you are going to be obsessed with the rule orientation so much, you are going to disenchant the client or the customer, because this very so-called rationality and impersonality, when you are getting obsessed with it, then it's a problem. So let me tell you an example. For example, there is an insurance company, okay? Right? Let me give a disclaimer, no paid promotions. Okay? So, let's say there is an Echo. Okay? And then there is a government company. Okay? Any company. I happen to get a term plan, right? So, a person A has a term plan of Echo. A person B has a term plan of this. So suppose a person had a date of birth 26th January 1950. You know how data, with all due respect to all the people and all the professions, at times the data entry operators are the most useless people out there. Right? Because they enter data in an incorrect manner. So the date of birth was like this. That means 26/01/1950. Okay. Now, this data entry operator has actually, both of them have the same date of birth. And in both the cases, some wrong data entry has happened with date of birth and it is erroneous. Now the persons, both A and B, are trying to somehow, pay the premium and do something with their stuff. Now the rule says that the data once set in the system cannot change unless requested by this. These are the IRDA rules, let us say. Larger rules. Okay. And it has to be taken up after verification. Any changes have to be made that are to be done after verification. So what Echo might have done, that within the playing of rules, okay, let us say it is like this, 26/01/1950. Okay, and the date of birth has been entered like this, 26 // 01 1950. In this case, I don't think this is a typographical error. This is not some other date has been placed. So this can be rectified without actually seeking a proof. So person A calls the office, the helpline of Echo, and says that boss, my date of birth is incorrectly entered. If you will see that this is the date of birth, and they know that this is not the format. They know. So what these guys will do, Echo people will say, okay, ideally to make a change, they will have to do a KYC again and again, but they see this is not something which needs a KYC. Okay. So they change it. Whereas this government company, because it is so rule obsessed, visit our nearest office. They will again do all the KYC. Look at the problem. Disenchantment. So this is what Goodner, Blau and Parsons are saying. That this very rationality and impersonality can actually lead to disenchantment. Because Weber does not explain the extent to which these rules should be obeyed.
It mainly focus on the individual.
It is mainly focusing on the individual. You are very right. So how that individual will react? Never know. Okay. Also, in the Weberian model, and this is these chaps only. Okay. So let me raise this aspect. I hope you got this, what I meant. There is a mismatch between authority and responsibility. Okay? While the bureaucracy is largely internally accountable. That means it has authority but very less responsibility. So every time in a democracy, whenever there is a political instability, this bureaucracy assumes supernatural powers. Okay? No, license era, we cannot say there was a political instability. Yes, after emergency, when Charan Singh and other governments come, everywhere you see a state government is dissolved. Ultimately, the bureaucracy becomes very powerful because there is lack of representation. That safety wall of democratic accountability and ensuring of that accountability is no more there. Okay. Peter Blau is actually looking at the social structure within the Weberian edifice. So it says that these very social elements which are placed in the Weberian structure, they are assigned functions without any consideration of the disturbances that these elements can bring into the organizational structure. Similarly, Weber ignores the positive aspects that they might bring and bring in the efficiency. That is why you see it is here in the critique of Blau that you can relate that the bureaucratic organizations are status quoist. They lack the innovation. Okay. So that is where you can link Blau. So in the significant issues of Indian administration, civil service, right? Reforms, everywhere you can use blow. क्या हुआ?
Came to hearing. So blouse came to hearing theory.
Right, the same theory. Next is Argyris. Not the theorist, I am talking about the criticism only. We are still on the criticism. His criticism is simple to understand, that it inhibits or restricts the psychological growth of the individuals. Also, it can become a cause of frustration and conflict. Gudner points out to the internal contradictions. Like conflict between expertise and obedience. Simon, as you are aware, is talking about bounded rationality. So I believe you all can relate to that. Similarly, while analyzing these organizations, people like Bernard saying that the informal element should be given due importance to bring about the productivity. That is why you see Weber is included in the classicals. Also, if you see, the Weberian model is ethnocentric, because this model was there in Germany. It did not speak for the reality of every, sort of an organization, government or state apparatus. So it is largely Europe, whereas the bureaucracies were very much there. You see the rise of Japan, I always talk about it. The rise of Japan, China. So do you think that they rose up without any system? No, but they were different from the Western system. And like you are saying, they were very good systems with full of ethos. Right? So it completely negates all those aspects. So the view is ethnocentric. Okay? Then Delaney. He is actually viewing the Weberian idea vis-a-vis development. Again, the criticism is based on the idea of ethnocentrism. That Weberian bureaucracy might be useful in Western Europe and the Western constructs, but in other places to bring up development, the Weberian bureaucracy might not be the ideal solution, or might not be the sufficient solution. It might need to get complemented with other models. Next, Beetham. प्लीज अंडरस्टैंड, किसी का क्वेश्चन गलत नहीं होना चाहिए एग्जाम में वेबेरियन क्रिटिसिज्म से. आई एम गिविंग यू एज मेनी पर्सपेक्टिव्स एज पॉसिबल. ओके, डू नॉट slip on this, please. It's a request. Is everybody getting this? All right. So Beetham says that the Weberian ideas were purely technical, instrumental in nature. Also, the Weberian analysis say that the bureaucracy tends to acquire power. That means it is contradictory to the instrumental view, because it wants to become a separate power center in the society so that it can take up the goal setting function. Also, you see, the Weber's bureaucratic structure was also emblematic of the caste structure. And hence it cannot represent the broader view of the society, because whatever the societal structure is, that is represented in the bureaucracy. Hence it reinforces certain parochial ideas. You see, earlier, before reservation and all that, even in India, you saw that the bureaucrats, the secretaries, actually belong to a certain social strata, certain castes, the IAS officers, whereas people belonging to disadvantaged section or so-called perceived lower caste were doing the lower level menial jobs. Okay, so that's again something that you can incorporate. Then off. Clause off. He says that this bureaucracy is blinded. It only follows the rules mechanically and blindly. He says that this stems from the idea of organizational rationality, which is fine. But there is also another type of rationality which is there. That is systematic rationality. That is the systematic rationality. The bureaucratic fulfillment of the functional requirement of what? Of the societal environment. This is especially relevant in the welfarist developing sort of states. Also, if the society is evolved, then this systemic rationality and bureaucratic rationality can come together, overlap. Example, Singapore. Okay. Also, in general, the Weberian system has been labeled as closed. Now, people in defense of Weber say that most of the time when we criticize Weber, it is we are criticizing his ideal system. So he counters. Such people counter and say, what? You needed an unideal system as a reference frame. But as a reference frame, it has to be ideal. Okay, so they say that you needed an unideal system as a reference frame. The idea, the conceptualization has to be the ideal. It is how you compare the reality. Okay. So that is something which is in defense of Weber, which the Weberian cheerleaders say. Okay. Also, Negro and Negro. they say that the Weber never used the term ideal or perfect. He said he simply used the idea ideal to reflect on what was prevailing and what could or should be. Okay? Weber himself accepted that the deviation from his models are many and they are fine. And it is because of these deviations that these dysfunctionalities exist, and we should work on bringing things together. Okay? Understood? Now, we have seen the Marxian critique of the bureaucracy, right? Now, I want you to have a view of another scholar, that is Morstein Marx. Morstein Marx, and write his view on bureaucracy. Okay? So, this is your homework. Alright? Another scholar which has been quite a few times asked by UPSC is Bennis. Warren Bennis. Okay? He says that the bureaucracy has become obsolete. He says that the bureaucracy was nothing but a reaction to nepotism, personal subjugation, etc. He says that the bureaucracy was designed to manage the routine, predictable activities in the society. With now the environment is rapidly changing, less predictability is there. The bureaucracy is become lesser and lesser suitable by the time. He says that the bureaucracy has rigid rules, well-defined chain of command that is against specialized skills or specialization. Because the people who will have specialized skills will have far more knowledge. They'll like to be far more autonomous. He says that the bureaucracy is one tool to manage the growing nature of the organization. But the growing nature itself brings up multifaceted complexities. This leads to what? This leads to further tightening of bureaucratic control. Okay? That means greater impersonality. The prevailing norms are about more democratic, participative organization, whereas the bureaucracy recommends mechanistic, highly centralized, highly controlled managerial system. Also, Bennis says that this kind of a bureaucracy is not suitable for the development administration because it is status quoist. They have a free hand in fulfilling their vested interest. Gladden is saying that Bureaucracy restricts personal growth and development as it does not take into account the informal organization. It provides no means of conflict resolution, underutilizes human resources, and cannot handle the technological changes. All right, understood? So after this, we'll be taking up the dynamic administration. That is folate or folate, as some of you call her. But before that, I want you to flip through the pages and let me know if there are any queries. Please pay special emphasis to the quotations, especially Foley. Okay, and otherwise also the thinkers from the SMT, CMT, etc. That is why I've told you to make a compilation and have a view. Just think, okay, whether you know what is the context, what is it talking about, the heart of the things. If you do not understand a statement or so, bring it to me so that you understand it. I'll make you understand that. Okay, otherwise in the examination, if that statement comes across or something similar to that statement comes across, you'll be in trouble. Okay. So the dynamic administration, we can say, was a precursor to the human relations school. It was one of the earliest moves to view the organizational management business dynamics from the point of view of how human beings behave, interact in an organization. From the point of view of human relationships. Okay? When we always say that Foley was ahead of her times, it was a time and space in which she was working. That was the age where workers were merely considered a part of the larger process. That is the cog in the wheels kind of an approach. Okay? So, her work, Speaker of the House of Representatives, New State, Creative Experience, Dynamic Administration. Okay, all of them contributed. Okay. But remember, at the heart of this human relationship, that was at the heart of the Foley's analysis, her idea was something of a scientific cooperation. That is at the heart of it. She wanted to create this cooperative system wherein the superordinates and the subordinates should ideally collaborate in a manner like the superordinates and other superordinates at a horizontal level. So she wanted to blur the lines between the horizontal and the vertical collaboration. And therefore, due to these aspects and more in her analysis, we see her as a link between the classical theories and the behavioral theories. So while chronologically she belonged to the scientific era, philosophically she belonged to the era of the social man. Owing to the classical, approach, or viewing from the classical lens, she came up with certain principles. She believed in universality of those principles. But as a behavioralist, she factored in the human factor. Okay? So I hope you all are aware about Foley's views on things like conflict, integration technique, okay, how the integration has to be brought about. Are conflicts healthy or not? What are the challenges to the integration? Then her ideas on orders, the depersonalizing of orders. अरे पता है नहीं पता? The depersonalizing of orders. Her ideas on power, authority, control. इसमें से कुछ भी नहीं पता तो मुझे बता देना. Her ideas on planning, coordination. Leadership. Just have a look if you know all these ideas. Foley is a very important scholar. Leadership by position, leadership by personality, leadership by functions. अरे पता है नहीं पता? पता है? Yes बोलो. Largely the positivist aspect of Foley are asked. Positive aspect, not positivist. Positive aspects of Foley are asked. Or at times we have said the criticism of Foley, for example, by people like R.J.S. Bakar, who say that she was an idealist. She was an idealist. Okay. Also, her views on trait theory are important. She rejected trait theory. Rather than, she was more of the votary of the situational leadership. She said that the leadership as a function depends on three variables: the leader himself, the follower, and the situation. While she is counting the leader himself, but she is negating the trait theory. Also, with respect to responsibility, she favors cumulative responsibility. That the workers should also have a sense of responsibility vis-a-vis their units. चलो सबको पता है. Everybody knows. So, as far as the criticism of Foley goes, she has been termed as illusionary by a lot many scholars. While her consideration for the human element is appreciated, it is often said that she ignored the social processes which was there, while only being considerate of the psychological conflicts. Some are saying that the ideas are illusionary because they are opposing or contradictory. For the fact that she actually argues for both collectivism as well as individualism. She argues for both aristocracy and democracy. Another dichotomy is that while she stresses upon the executive control, right, she is also focusing on the specialized knowledge or expertise. So there is centralization as well as decentralization. So they say these principles are contradictory. RJS Baker's, you know, critique is there. Have it. She has been termed idealistic. Okay. Next will be Human Relations School. First, let me know how many homeworks have been given today.
Three.
Which are those?
Similarity and difference between e-governance and CMT.
E-governance and CMT, we need the similarities and the differences. Okay.
The first one was the courts. The courts.
Quotes and
The Muslim next.
100 words on them each. What do they mean? Okay, that kind of. So that in the examination you do not struggle with them. And the third one is
Muslim marks on bureaucracy.
Morstein marks on bureaucracy. Okay, these are the three homeworks which are there. Okay, add a fourth one. The fourth one will be Foley. Okay, and the relevance of her ideas, that is integration, authority, how she views authority, planning, etc. I made you write those five, six things, na? And you all agreed, pata hai ji, pata hai ji, pata hai ji, right? Sabko pata hai. So on each of them 50 words, so that will make around what? 250, 300 words, just 5, 6 things were there, no? Planning, coordination, all those things. 50 words on each, not more. Okay? And an Indian example against each of them. Okay? That example does not come in 50 words. 50 words is just the description. Example, you can take as many words as you can. Okay? Understood? They should match with the Foley's idea. Not do this brain gym. This is important. And I need all four of them ASAP. Okay, it is not to be suggested that you can give it on day after tomorrow or something. Try and give it ASAP. This is very important for your mental gym. And this ideally, each one of them, because I'm not saying that you write Marston Marx because you haven't read him. Without reading him, read him, take internet help, whatever you can, okay, and write that. All of this task should not take more than 1.5 hours. Time it. You have internet, you have books, you have notes, you have everything. All of it should not take more than 1.5 hours. I understand that you might be having classes after this, etc. But I expect a response by 12:30 tonight. Tonight I need it. Okay. So next will be the Human Relations School and Chester Bernard and other people. So we'll take them up from the next session. Okay. Any queries before we part for the day? Okay. So Anay was saying, sir, can we say that the reason for rejection of the trait theory by Fole is because she believed in leadership of function rather than leadership of personality or position? Yes, that is precisely the reason. That when we say that Fole is actually, rejecting the idea of the trait theory. But the reason is this, okay, but then you will have to go one step backward more. Why? Why she's stressing on the situation? Okay, so this aspect should be remembered, that the root will come from the situation. Understood? Okay. Any other query, anyone, before we wind this session up? Social processes. In the context of Fole, you are saying, Saurabh? Saurabh, social processes would mean that there are certain processes which are there in the society. For example, whom will you eat with? Okay? Or whom will you dine with? Whom will you go on a trip? Who you can accept as orders. So there are multiple social cleavages. Okay? And while she is looking at the psychological element of the functionaries within the organization, she is ignorant of the fact that these social processes actually come into the organization. She is just one level shy from labeling the organization as a social system. Because then that qualification of labeling the organization as a social system would be a very comprehensive understanding, which would not only entail the social behavior, the psychological aspect, but also the permeation of the social processes within the organizational dynamics. So this is where Fole remains shy of. She sort of restricts herself. Understood that? No, Saurabh, no. Informal aspect would also include, yes, group dynamics, etc. But that is within the organization. Informal aspect is a subset of the social processes, not the whole. Yes, to an extent you can say informal aspect also. That is not incorrect. But is that completely correct? No. Social process would be a wider gamut of things. It will not just involve the informal groupism, informal relationships, but also the processes that happen in the social space. Okay. Anybody, any other query?